ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take this moment to say thank you for listening to the Real ResQ podcast. It means a lot to me that you enjoy these stories as much as I do. Since the start of this podcast, we've had a lot of support from all over the world. It has been amazing. Now, we have companies joining our team that also want to say thank you for all that you are doing out there standing the watch. These companies are offering discounts on their products as a way to support the rescue community and those tuning into the Real ResQ podcast. Just go to therealresq.com, click on sponsors, and see these incredible offers for yourself. This episode of the Real ResQ podcast is brought to you by Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated helicopter hoist and winch provider. Access, because when lives are at stake and conditions are challenging, clear communication is of the utmost importance. SR3 Rescue Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. And VersaLifts. To be your best, you need to squat your best. Breeze Eastern. They dedicate themselves to our helicopter rescue world. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November of 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and the unique mission requirements have changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, the operators, and those being rescued has not. Contact them today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. The Axness PNG wireless ICS system can bring cutting-edge wireless intercommunication system technology to any aircraft. The PNG system can be fully integrated into an existing ICS system or can be carried on and off as a mobile base station. They can go anywhere at any time on any aircraft. Plus, with the strongest and most robust waterproof handheld in the market, this system can take a hit and keep working. Their wireless intercom systems are designed to enhance situational awareness through improved communication capability. This system brings superior noise canceling technology to eliminate rotor wash and engine noise from your ICS. The Axness PNG wireless system is currently deployed in more than 1,800 public safety, air ambulance, and search and rescue aircrafts worldwide. I have personally used the Axness system in 4 different countries and on 5 different airframes. It is awesome. If you want more information, contact them today at axness.com. That's AXNES.com. You just make sure you tell them Quinny sent me. SR3 Rescue Concepts is a training company that can help your helicopter training. They train daytime, nighttime, aerial firefighting, hoist, long line, fast rope, rappel, and more. They can assist your program with standardization and safety checks or just an FAA annual refresher. With the certified flight instructor pilots and experienced crew, they are ready to help your agency keep up to date with current techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. Plus, right now, SR3 is offering 10% off anything in their web store with the promo code, all capital letters, Real ResQ, REALRESQ. Plus, they are offering another 10% from their partners Petzl and their equipment. All you got to do is send an email to info@sr3rescueconcepts.com. Mention this podcast, the Real ResQ podcast, and they'll take care of the rest. And VersaLifts. When you're at the gym working on your squats, building your leg strength for the next rescue mission, depth matters. If you're like me, getting below parallel on your squats is tough. Well, allow me to introduce VersaLifts heel inserts. These gems have become one of my new favorite accessories in my gym bag. Simply place them into your regular training shoe, either on top or underneath the insole, and bam! You've got a heel lift benefit of a weightlifting shoe, but the comfort and flexibility of your regular trainers. So the next time your workout just has heavy squats, grab your V2 strength inserts. Or how about a run, pull up, push up, air squat, and another run? Grab your V2 endurance inserts. Or my own personal workout of running, clusters, and ring muscle ups. Grab your original V2 inserts and go crush it. Check them out today at vlifts.com or on Instagram at Versalist. And when you're ready to get a few pair of your own, make sure you get your 10% off with the Real ResQ discount code. Squat well, friends. Coming up next in this episode of The Real ResQ, we are joined by a guy who's done search and rescue in the United States, Sweden, and Greece, just to name a few. You go from one person to 100 people in this episode. The stories are amazing. I'm so happy you joined us. So please welcome our next guest, Mr. Matthew Fader. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Real ResQ. Today, I've got a guy who is originally from the US, now living in Sweden, part of the Swedish Sea Rescue Society, and also an international, what is it? What is it?
International Maritime Rescue Federation.
That's what I was trying to say, but that was not what was coming out at all.
Otherwise in Sweden and the Swedish Sea Rescue Society, I work with search and rescue development internationally with pretty much everyone.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matthew Fader. Hey! What's up, Matthew? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I've been listening to some of your podcasts and hearing friends and as well as strangers that work in SAR. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. It's cool to be part of it.
Yeah, well, man, I'm super psyched. Actually, I'm going to give a little shout out to Graham down there in South Africa. He's the one that he gave me your contact information and said, "Hey, man, I got a guy up in Sweden." I was like, "Yes, please." So that's how it all happened.
Awesome. And it was really
Graham.
Cool listening to his podcast, and I was able to host him about a year ago exactly up here in Sweden and talk a lot about SAR operations. So what a great person and great organization down in South Africa.
Yeah.
So it's part of what I do. It's reach out to fantastic people in the SAR world.
Right. Oh, it's one of my favorite parts about this podcast. I get to talk to you guys that are all over the world doing this.
Cool.
That's good. So now you and Graham, you're, for like everybody's awareness, you're kind of doing the same thing where it's sea rescue, but a lot of it's on small boats that roll out and going on sea. And is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, besides the obvious geographical differences of South Africa and way up here in Scandinavia, we're almost in the same time zone, but just straight up the planet. We have a similar organization in that way. The Swedish Sea Rescue Society is a volunteer organization. It's as well as the South Africans, it's non-governmental. We are a volunteer NGO doing a large part of the sea rescue. So we're very similar that way. And
wow.
A number of stations, number of boats, different size vessels and all that doing SAR as well as medical transports and preventative shouts if someone gets in trouble. But I'll get more into that in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, we don't want to go too far. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Matthew, if you don't mind, give everybody a little bit of background. From the US, moved to Sweden.
Yeah.
How did that happen? And then how did you get into all the search and rescue you do now?
Yeah, it's a strange story, and everyone has their journeys, and I'm in this like weird halfway point in my life that soon 50, and 25 years of my life I spent in the United States, born and raised, and then 25 years now this year I've been living in Sweden. So yeah, I was born in the East Coast in New Jersey, just like born in the USA, like the boss. Grew up on the islands there,
Just out of curiosity,
what
exit?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not so good on the turnpike, but so I was born out there, like in New Jersey, and spent a lot of time on the Jersey Shore back in the 70s and 80s, and was really enthralled by like the whole lifeguards and beach life and all that. Spent a bit of time in Baltimore, Maryland, obviously very maritime harbor focus, and just the whole longshoreman and having that feel. A little bit of salt water there, and going down to the Chesapeake Bay, Annapolis. Spent a lot of time on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. My parents lived there for a bit. even more maritime. You're living on a sandbank out in the middle of the ocean with all shipwrecks
Awesome.
dating back to
Yeah.
pirates and all that.
Yeah.
Um, so then the large part of my life was spent out in California. So I made the shift over to the West Coast. Throughout my life, both East Coast and West Coast, I've been surfing. I'm a wave surfer since a little kid, getting to know the ocean and just want to do everything I could close to the water. Did more and more lifeguard stuff. Got over to the West Coast and just surfed and did a bit of art and things like that. And one time when I was probably like 19, I was surfing at a place called Trestles. Trestles is one of the most popular surf areas in Southern California. It's actually located on Camp Pendleton, U.S. Marine Base, just south
Yeah.
of San Clemente. So we're talking like 93 back in the day. So no cell phones and stuff like that. And it happened to be like a Halloween night. And seriously, full moon. It was getting dark, coming out from surf, and Trestles is so crowded. Um, there's a lot of people in the water. It's twilight, getting dark, and then all of a sudden there's some commotion in the water, and some guy was actually unconscious. I think he fell off his board. This is all speculation because I think the board hit his head, or maybe he hit the cobblestones on the bottom. But he had a facial laceration, and he was unconscious. And who knows how long he was under the water? But a surfer too brought him up to the surface, and then we helped bring him onto the cobbles and do CPR, which for me, I really think it felt like a half an hour. It might have been 10 minutes, it might have been 15, but if you've ever done CPR and mouth to mouth, and it feels like an eternity because your arms
Yeah.
get so tired. And I'm like 19, so I'm like fit for fight and ready to go. But since there was no cell phones back then, and we're pretty far away, Trestles, you have to walk quite a bit to get to your car, or even these like emergency call boxes that would be on the highway, which of course were disabled, like
Of
pulled,
course. Why
graffitied
wouldn't
up
they
and
be?
torn out and stuff like that. So someone was a runner and went to all the way back to land, the what do you say, civilization, and were able, and then like a full on like chopper came down. So it wasn't like, since it's on Camp Pendleton, there was like a military response, both from military police and as well as like a helicopter who came down, and military doctor came off. And I remember handing off this patient who'd been doing CPR for how long, unconscious, water coming out of him after every breath, and that I was just left there. The chopper flew off, the patient flew off, and I felt like, oh, this is what I want to do. I was like, to combine the salt water, the ocean, the surf, pulling people out and hopefully saving lives. I have no idea if that guy made it. Most likely not, considering how long we did it. But that made just this huge impression on me. So after that, I was just like, what can I do medically, like to get more medically proficient? I know the ocean since I was a kid, and of course, you never learn the ocean fully, especially in the surf. But I thought like, okay, I want to do as much medical training as possible. So I did like wilderness first aid, wilderness first responder, woofer, EMT courses, stuff like that while I'm in the US. And this is in like my early 20s. I lived in Laguna Beach, California for most of this time.
Nice.
And California, it's just this paradise. I mean, just amazing art colony that was still, you could still live there being a poor surfer and artist and all that.
Not
So
anymore.
no, not anymore. So I would surf all the time, but California, the way it is, there's all these natural disasters. And in 93, same year pretty much, there was a huge fire. You had this huge fire in Laguna Canyon that burnt up most of the city. Not most of the city, but a lot of houses in Laguna Canyon. There was a big fire, and I noticed all these people in panic. Um, I was in school in the canyon, and I noticed the fire coming through, saw all these animals running, and I was like, okay, something's up. And I had this feeling like I could keep my calm in a chaotic situation. So it kind of built upon this experience of the surfer, that I just say, or was part of the rescue. And I felt like, okay, I'm being calm. I can evacuate, help other people evacuate. This turned into a very large fire, and helping people move away from this fire for like half the day until the night the city evacuated. So that being said, I just felt like this, like, okay, I kind of like catastrophe management or rescue. I don't like catastrophes, but if it's going to happen, I want to be prepared. So building upon the medical experience and all that, I just thought, like, how am I going to get better at this? So later on, a couple of years later, you had like El Nino, and it started raining so much. And of course, after this year of fires, there was nothing holding on to the ground, like the soil and these large cliffs into the canyon. So there was rock slides and mud slides, and another catastrophe built on another catastrophe. So further up in Laguna Canyon, there was a mudslide. A section of houses was taken out, and there's probably YouTube clips on this. Of course, this is back in the early 90s. But one of the most amazing things I've ever seen ever, I didn't actively take part in it, but I was in this area of the canyon helping people in this mudslide. But what it was is that another rescuer had seen something in the mud going past, and it looked like a rock to him. So he just reached down and pulled it, and it happened to be an infant that was swept out from a house. And he pulled did the finger sweep, got the mud out, and crying, and it was alive. So
Oh
hearing that
my
story and being part
God.
of that area, it was like, this is incredible. Like, there is nothing better than being part of not just like a large scale rescue, but being part of a rescue team that is amazing individuals in the right place at the right time. So it's like, okay, how am I going to get better at catastrophes? I'm just thinking like, oh, you can't practice this stuff. It happens when it happens, and you can be prepared to a certain point. So I had definitely got the rescue bug. So yeah, I'm getting a bit older now, and I was like, and while I was living in Laguna Beach, I was living with a Swedish girl. Um, we met there in school. We moved in together. We're living beachside, living the life. And after she graduated from art school there in Laguna, we decided like, oh, maybe we should go to Sweden. And I came over here just like 24, as like on a vacation. I was like, this place is awesome. Came here in the summer. And there's something here called the midsummer holidays, like, which is like the biggest party of the year, more or less. The midsummer, the
Oh,
solstice, and all that.
yes.
So I was here, and I came here to the archipelago of Gothenburg on the west coast, and it was like party and boats and sun all night long, more or less. And I was like, yeah, this place is cool. I could think about living here. Went back to Los Angeles, went to the Swedish consulate, and applied for residency. So we hung out there in Laguna for a little bit more, and then in 1998 we decided like, okay, let's make the move. Um, so we took a big leap, going from California and everything I knew in the United States, both East and West Coast, and like, hey, I'm going to move to a foreign country. That's going to entail learning another language, starting, I guess, another career, how it would be. So I made the big move, and then 1999, my daughter was born here in Sweden, my first daughter.
Nice.
Um, yeah, shout out to Linnea, she's awesome. But
Linnea,
yeah,
woo!
Linnea. So she was like the reason. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna live here. I live in Sweden now. I have a Swedish daughter, a Swedish wife, and all that. I got to get a
I
Volvo.
love it, dude. I gotta
Yeah,
get a Volvo.
and a house that's painted a certain red. All these different
Oh,
things.
that's great.
Yeah. So Swedish life was full on, and I still wanted to build upon the medical thing. I worked a little bit in the outdoor industry, working with different companies and testing gear and stuff like that. So I had a foot like still there. The maritime climate here, first and foremost, in Sweden, and especially on the west coast here, is huge. There's so many leisure boaters, huge tradition. I mean, of course, Vikings and all that, but definitely like commercial stuff like that. So you feel that Gothenburg's a maritime city, similar to Baltimore or what have you, places like that. Hardworking town, like the boss comes from. Um, so yeah, I decided to go continue on the medical side. So I went and got my, I guess, EMT here
Okay.
while I'm learning Swedish. So it was like, okay, it wasn't just getting re-qualifying for that kind of stuff. It was like, do it in another language. What is spleen? Like, I don't know. Like learning all these different words for anatomy parts. But anyway, I think that my American medical like courses and stuff really prepared me, have given me a head start. So it was more like repeating courses rather than redoing them. I did the EMT stuff. I did a practical nurse, and then I continued on to university because university is free here. So I went to the
Oh,
University of
wow.
Gothenburg. Yeah, I learned what's up to something called Swedish B that got me into the university with my grades and all that. And I got to take a degree in nursing, so a Bachelor of Science, and I become an RN. So it was fantastic. So I was like, okay, the path is clear. I'm still not
Wow.
in the salty environment, but I'm getting into the clinical stuff and learning as much as possible. So it was super cool. I got an education. What do I do with it? How do I get back to what I originally felt with these, rescues out in the field, larger catastrophe, mass casualty incidents, and all that kind of stuff. So everyone wants to get on like ambulance, helicopter, and ambulance and all that. But I felt like I need to do some clinical stuff. So I went to like surgery, did some stuff like that for a little bit. And then about 8 months into my RN career, I switched over to psychiatry. And
Oh,
it was kind of like
okay.
a, yeah, full 180. And it was like, because it was really, really fascinating, like, psychiatric emergencies and stuff like that. And the reason I did it was like, I wanted to work with people with schizophrenia, people with psychosis. And it's like, again, it seems really far away from the blood and the broken bones and the SAR missions or
I would say
speech
yes.
rescue. But my thinking behind this was like, okay, it's hard to practice for catastrophe medicine. It's hard to practice for mass casualty incidents. But if I work with people on closed wards, that were always in a fight or flight situation, where reality was always changed for them, and keep my cool, and know how to deal with not just violent patients, but people that are really struggling, to get a grip on things. It's like I can keep a cool head out in the field. That's my thinking, at least, because that's what I saw like in California during earthquakes or the mudslides or the fires. That people, they were in like this mini psychosis because
Oh
they
yeah.
can't deal with it and their brain was overloaded and they weren't functioning. But I could keep a clear head. So I did that for almost a decade. I worked in Sahlgrenska University Hospital, and I became like I say, department head of psychosis and schizophrenia, working with all these, I don't want to say crazy people, but people with mental illnesses. And it was awesome. It was the most unique people you could ever imagine. And
You don't have to say
yeah,
it. The rest of us that are all listening, we can all say it
yeah.
right in our head.
Mm. No, but again, the most fascinating people I ever worked with, and sometimes again there was, violence and threats and things like that, because some people can't handle it and they need to be helped into a position, whether it's brought into the ward itself to the emergency department, or
Yeah.
my thinking was like to help them in their home as much as possible to keep them out of the hospital. So an amazing experience, and yeah, I can never replace that. And this experience would come back into my life. So during this time, I've been thinking, okay, I want to get back out into the field, So maybe not professionally do it right away, going from like, ambulance or something, or ambulance helicopter. I'm thinking, okay, I'll maybe get into sea rescue, because how it works here in Sweden is you have, sea rescue is run by the Swedish Maritime Administration, a government
Okay.
agency. They're the ones who run the JRCC, so Joint Rescue Coordination Center. So they're the one who called the shouts and all that. The Swedish Maritime Administration, they also have the rescue helicopters.
Okay.
So you have 5 bases, and the helicopters go out from these different bases around the country. But the lion's share of SAR is run by the Swedish Sea Rescue, Society. So a non-governmental, volunteer-based organization are the ones that are getting the call from the JRCC and Swedish Maritime Administration.
Wow.
There is a Swedish Coast Guard, and they are very, very much part of the SAR system. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Swedish Coast Guard, like a lot of coast guards around the world, are border protection, absolutely, and not so much customs, because there's a customs agency, but they do environmental protection. They do a lot of cleaning up in oil spills, and they
Yeah.
definitely respond to SAR alarms. But 90% of SAR cases, the Swedish Sea Rescue Society and volunteers are involved. And that's a pretty crazy
Wow.
model. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I want to become a volunteer at least, and get into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I joined the Swedish Sea Rescue Society. Um, and in the meantime, I was actually talking with their central office, and the then CEO, who's now chairman of the board. named Captain Rolf Westerstrom. I was like, I'd like to apply my skills and maybe work for you guys too. The Swedish Sea Rescue Society is like, I would say 2,400 volunteers. There is
2,400 people, volunteers that come in.
sea
Wow.
rescue volunteers. There
Wow.
is
That's a lot of
74
people.
stations, in a country. Like the coast of Sweden is huge.
Wow.
And I don't want to brag or boast, but Sweden actually has the most islands in the world.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. You would think,
Hey.
and I mean, no offense. I mean, Canada, they have a lot. The Philippines, Indonesia. But if you really look at it, Sweden has the most islands. But what constitutes an island here can be a rock sticking above sea level on a normal day. So we have a lot of rocks sticking out that are called islands, but we have a lot of difficult waters in archipelagos, both outside of Stockholm and Gothenburg and other places. So
Oh,
anyway,
that's cool. Yeah.
that being said, we have 74 stations placed around the country. That's roughly the size larger than California. But if you turn it on its axis, to put things in perspective for our non-Europeans, if you turn Sweden from the north of Sweden and turn it on its axis, it's going to reach all the way down to Portugal. It's a long coastline.
Oh,
It's like
wow.
Norway has a long coastline. So we have a lot of different places that we need to place rescue stations for like proximity of the alarm. Because alarm out up north, it's going to take a long time to get to. So we have a lot of different stations that are based, are placed there because of, what's the population, what's the boating life there, what's the probability of SAR rescues and so forth. So just during the time that I've worked here, we've increased stations from like 50 something to this 74 and 2,400 volunteers.
Wow.
So that being said, the administration of this non-governmental organization, which is also membership in this organization, then was about like 25 people running this huge organization. So it was really hard to get a foot in the door as a paid employee.
Yeah.
So I worked on it for a number of years, and I made my case of how I could perhaps improve things if I came on board. And so I was 2012. I was able to make the shift, take a leave of absence from the hospital, and start working here in a professional capacity, as well as a volunteer. So when I go out to my station, I'm a volunteer. I take off one hat, and I'm not the guy from the office because I don't have that role out there. I do SAR just like anyone else. So anyway, I started working for Swedish Sea Rescue and had a number of different roles. Like almost right away, I started working with education. So I ran the educational department the first year. And that was a lot of fun. It's great, like learning. And that's probably the biggest interaction I had with volunteers. Besides the volunteers at my station, it was like running courses and seeing that there was instructors for different courses that are, similar to like a basic safety, an STCW, like a 3-day version of that we run here. It was like 200 students per year we had. And this is all paid for by the society for these volunteers. So they're getting an amazing experience by being a volunteer. So I did that for a bit, like running the education and learning more myself about boats. Because if you really want to get back to it, it's like, yeah, I'm a surfer that knows medicine. And I can drive a boat like Boston Whaler, maybe a Hobie Cat, but these men and women out here, they've been driving different types of boats their whole life. Luckily, the sea rescue organization is, it's not large ships. We're not talking about massive steel ships of, 100 meters long or anything like that. These are fast surface rescue units, but really advanced for a volunteer organization. Double water jet, self-righting, all-weather lifeboats, single jet, smaller 20-foot versions, and so all different sizes. And so I'm running the education. I'm like, I'm not that great at driving a boat, but I'll get instructors that are. I just have to kind of have an overview of it. So it was a huge learning process for me, getting into the branch. But I knew what I knew is salt water and saving lives. So I tried to apply that as much as I could throughout my career here. And again, this is 2012. So since then, I've driven a few boats, but not great. I still rather be on the deck taking care of the patient or rescue swimming for that matter. And anyway, funny story. And if we back up for a quick second, when I moved to Sweden in 1998, I went out to one of these rescue stations, which is now my station, without naming names. I went out to this island outside of Gothenburg, and I had my surfboard. Like I was looking for surf everywhere, and there is some waves out here, some pretty really good ones too. And opposed to California, it's not very crowded. Some spots are, but that was part of the whole exploration and all that. So I went to this island where this rescue station was. Had my came back after surf, a little bit long hair and all that. And I remember these like old sea dogs that were standing at the station, and I like
Yeah.
tried to approach them and you know step in and, hey, I would very much like to volunteer, and they just like looked me up and down like, nah, like no, like we don't need anyone to jump in the water like an idiot like you. Like we don't get in the water. It's like this is a rescue boat. So it was a different mentality even 20 years ago. It was like we have big ships. Yes, okay, we'll wear life jackets, but only if we have to. And we don't get in the water, but we'll save as many people as we can from the boat. Where I was like, hey, I'll jump in the water, and I got really offended. Like they looked me up and down like I wasn't worth anything, and I felt like, man, I can get in most any surf. I spent some bit time in Hawaii too, and I was like, you don't know waves, like I was like really, and it took me that full like decade to get over it and get my foot in the door until the organization too was like mature enough to like let other type of people. So that being said, now 2023, I mean, if you look at our volunteer base, it used to be people that were fishermen, and when they're off from the fishing or commercial shipping for that matter, and go back to their home cities, they would man the lifeboats or the rescue boats for the society. And that was way since like 1907. It's been that way. But now, like as times go on, it's like we pride ourselves that of these 2,400 volunteers, there's all walks of life. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that are like me that have a medical background, nurses,
Yeah.
ambulance, doctors, what have you. A lot of people still involved in commercial shipping or fishing and all that. But you have IT, you have plumbers, you have seamstresses, you name it. And it sounds really strange, but like these are some of the most professional people I've met when it comes to maritime SAR, because they train for it, they have the heart for it, and the skill sets that they bring into the Sea Rescue Society makes us more complete. So back to the original point, is like the administration for the society was pretty small, like 20, 30, now 40 people, because there's so much volunteer power. Like these
Wow.
volunteers they're just amazing. You can build this whole society and everyone helps each other. Yes, this society has a technical department. We build boats together with shipyards. We have a communication department, definitely, and fundraising, because that's one of the most important things besides volunteers. You got to have
Yeah.
the money to run the organization, but you have
Right.
to have volunteers for the organization to be anything at all. So, so there's this huge power in volunteerism that really like talked to me, and I moved from education into a position that was called like leader of volunteer operations. So, and I had a partner who would say was maritime leader. He was, the designated person, the technical, the everything that had to do with the boats, and I was trying to like I say leader of volunteer operations. I tried to like talk with station leaders and the volunteers themselves with organization as well as training and stuff like that. So I did that for a number of years. And again, 2,400 volunteers, 2,400 unique skill sets. We also have 2,400 unique opinions about how an organization should be run. And sometimes it needs coaching and channeling and finding fantastic leaders locally, as well as dealing with things centrally. So hopefully did an okay job with that. I tried to meet as many people as possible and talk and coach them through things. And sometimes it went good, sometimes it didn't. Like any organization has its conflicts, but you have to really treat volunteers with the utmost care and respect. So yeah, that's been kind of like the red thread through the whole thing, just dealing with the volunteers and asking them to do extraordinary things and SAR missions out here. So what does SAR look like in Sweden? I think there's something like there's a population of 10 million in Sweden.
Oh,
with a
wow.
bunch of
That's a
islands.
lot.
Like I said, a bunch of islands, and a lot of open coasts too that are pretty exposed. We don't have North Atlantic swell like our counterparts in England or in Holland for that matter, with the North Sea beating down on them. We have decent amount of swell, and the water gets cold, and it's Arctic like, and it's dark in February. But like any place, a lot of the majority of boating and all that's done in the summer. So now June is like, starting to kick off the high season where we have our alarms. So of those 10 million in Sweden, there's something estimated like 1 million leisure boats.
Oh,
So think
wow.
about 10% of the population having a boat, which is not exactly true. I mean, I'm sure there's rowboats and small lakes and stuff
Yeah.
in places where we're not at. But the coastal SAR region, which we're mostly placed, and
Yeah.
some of the major lakes, there's a lot of boats and a lot of rocks to hit, a lot of grounding, a lot of getting a line in the propeller, things like that. So what we do a lot of, which is to say, 14,000 times we leave the dock each year.
Oh,
We
my
cast off
gosh.
14,000 times. 5,000 of those are what we call preventative shouts. So say a member of our organization, or even a non-member for that matter, if they get in trouble, run out of gas, hit a light grounding or something, they can give us a call directly to the station, or they call a central number, and then they'll the station will be designated. It's not emergency. It's not 911 or 112 in Europe. It's not call JRCC. It's like, hey, we need some help. And it's like, okay,
Wow.
how's the wind blowing? Can you throw in the anchor? We'll be there as soon as we can. And in a July day, one station can have 15 shouts at the same time. It's like, a lot of people need a lot of help
Oh,
during the
my
summer.
gosh.
So again,
So
this is
well,
volunteer
actually,
time.
real quick. So I just
Yeah.
did some quick math on that. 14,000 call outs per year, and that's across all 74 stations. Comes out to about 38 calls per day.
Yeah. I say 14,000
Wow.
times we leave the dock. So it could be our own call
Oh,
outs that we have
okay.
to do
Okay.
transportation. But yeah,
All
we're up
right.
there in the
That's still a
thousands
lot.
of call outs. Yeah. So we do these shouts because if we didn't do them, if we didn't go out and help this person that's in light distress or needs assistance, it'll probably become a SAR alarm eventually, or something that becomes more serious. The boat will go aground, it might take on water, the people will get a little shooken up depending on the wind, the weather, and obviously the time of year if the water's cold. So every type of this shout in the colder months, that's danger for life, because they're not going to last out there for as long as possible. So we do a lot of these shouts, and this is something, it's like, I guess, for universal for a lot of organizations, coast guards, volunteer organizations, whatever. When you tow a boat, it may seem like a mundane thing, but towings are serious. It's like, even if it's a leisure boat, you still have to hook up right. You have to make sure the lines don't snap, no one gets injured. That's one thing. But what I respect most out of towing missions, and these 5,000 missions that our volunteers do, is the time it takes. So a
Yeah.
member or someone will call us, okay, I need a tow, and we'll take them to the nearest safe harbor that they can reasonably get assistance with, whether it's a boat lift or a mechanic or something like that. It can take hours. It's like, oh, we have to tow
Yeah.
them at 6 knots. And it's like, oh, it's what, 10:30 at night when I got the shout. It's still light here in Sweden, but you can come home after midnight for I say a simple tow. But again, this is volunteer time we're talking about. You have to respect these people's, like,
Yeah.
free time, and that's what they're doing. So I never take towing missions lightly because of the time it takes volunteers to be able to do all these missions. So
Yeah, because they still got
that's
to go to work the next day.
yeah, yeah, and they might have left work to go do this. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's of these 2,000 volunteers, 2,400. Some of them take the beepers, so they get the shout, or they have the mobile call and all that. They might be at work, and their employers know that they're in Sea Rescue. They let them go. Some employers like, you can go when it's danger for life. But
Yeah.
if you got to tow someone, you got, I don't know.
Yeah.
It works differently for each individual, but there's like these individual, almost like contracts with their own employers to be able to do that. So, and about in Sweden, from the JRCC, that it's classified as SAR or Sea Rescue. danger for life. There's usually around 1,000 cases. It can be 1,100 cases or 1,200 or 900, depending on which year. And again, we're involved in 90% of those as a NGO.
Wow.
A lot of times in cooperation with others. So obviously, if there's a SAR alarm, and depending on the scale of it, sometimes our units can take care of it. Sometimes it's together with helicopters or together with Coast Guard, with police, you name it, depending on what type the mission is. I'll give you an example. Like last weekend at my station, it was like a sailboat at 4 a.m. Called our station. It was like, oh, we're on the rocks. We're outside the harbor. Yeah, 4 a.m. You can kind of guess that they've been out partying or something like that. And like, what do you mean you're on the rocks? Hang up the phone, call 112, the 911.
Okay.
The 112 dispatcher obviously will call, will connect to the JRCC. JRCC is like, okay, my station, you go out, you take care of it. And we'll also get Coast Guard to come too, for reasons being it in the morning and why were they there in the first place? Yeah, that kind of thing. So
Law
they're starting to
enforcement backup. Yes.
They evacuate 5 people. The boat's on the rocks. It's teetering back and forth, and it's windy, but it's like getting light by 5 a.m. here, at least at this time of year. They evacuate 5 people. Then the 6th and 7th person, I guess they were a little larger and they couldn't jump from a sailboat down to the rescue unit in this shallow, teetering, wavy water. So then they called the SAR helicopter to winch the last 2 off. So that's the cooperation of just something last weekend. So we're constantly doing stuff together and practicing together with these other governmental agencies and police type boats and all that. So cool cooperation, all the SAR stuff. We also do, I say, medical transports.
Okay.
There's the SAR Medivac stuff,
right.
And obviously helicopters. Swedish Maritime Administration rescue swimmer can go down and winch them off, depending on. Sometimes our boats will go ship to ship transfers with our vessels and then bring them to shore, depending on, again, the conditions. But again, back to all these islands we have. We have a lot of islands that are definitely not connected by ferries or bridges and stuff like that. So patients that have, I don't know, kidney stones or appendix and things like that need to get to land. In Sweden, there's one ambulance boat service, which is actually here in the archipelago of Gothenburg.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different places around the coast, both from Gothenburg and especially north towards the Norwegian border or major lakes, where we do medical transport. So someone gets a medical issue, they call 911, 112. The ambulance dispatch calls us and is like, okay, can you go get them? Yeah. So go getting them could be, going up to an island with a dock, sometimes with ambulance personnel, sometimes ourselves, and transporting them to the ambulance or together with ambulance personnel to land so they can go further to a hospital. If it's pre-01 and it's like heart attacks and things like that, you got to treat them there, stay and play kind of thing. Or the ambulance helicopter could be en route and all that. And then there's like the people that are out hiking on these lovely islands and they fall and they trip on a granite crack and break their femur or something. And that's all hands on deck and all the boats, and together with ambulance personnel, you have to hike these people across rocks to get them to the boat, to get them to land. So,
wow.
And there's a large number of these medical transports, and those are just increasing because more and more people are trying to go out and enjoy these islands. So yeah, a lot of alarms. And there's bonfires and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, again, volunteers doing these amazing things. So what else can we do?
This is like a jack of all trades on the ocean, man. You guys do a lot.
Yeah, we do a lot, and it's really cool to look at the different models. In my international work, both for the Swedish Sea Rescue Society and past work as a trustee for the International Maritime Rescue Federation, I've been in contact with almost every sea rescue organization in the world. It can be, Fiji, U.S. Coast Guard, most definitely. Have good friends and contacts I work together with there, where we collaborate and talk about different issues. I'll get into that in a minute. But especially in Europe, we have a lot of volunteer organizations that do similar, if not more, than we do here in Sweden. In England, there's the Royal National Lifeboat
Yeah.
RNLI. In Holland, you have KNRM, and I will not pronounce their name in Dutch. But they're volunteer
So good.
organizations with at incredible crew and great boats in rough conditions that work together with their local coast guards and maritime administrations. Finland, there's so many to name. Germany. So
Yeah.
it's really cool. And there are definitely volunteer organizations in other parts of the world, Virgin Islands, places where there's not a huge Navy or Coast Guard. And then, of course, you have all the Coast Guards, Uruguay, China, what have you.
Yeah.
Definitely Australia and New Zealand and stuff. So it's great to talk with all these different ones and compare their organizational structure of how they deal with different SAR, maritime SAR, as well as land-based SAR and remote areas, and then their training techniques and boats and stuff like that. But which is really cool, you see obviously with boats is that you can't compare apples and oranges. A boat that works here in Sweden is probably not the best in Holland, and vice versa and stuff like that, depending on the waves, wind, and all that. But I think we have fantastic rescue units, and it works really well for that type of SAR and ambulance and all that kind of stuff that we do here. Internationally is what, again, my area. We started working in different projects, and a lot of NGOs as well as government agencies have different, I say, international projects. And there's some really cool initiatives that have been around the globe that I've been part of. A couple worth mentioning. We started working a number of years ago with like greater diversity in maritime SAR. So there's a specific project within the IMO as well as IMRF, International Maritime Rescue Federation, with women in SAR.
Oh,
so
nice.
increasing the number of women working in maritime SAR, or at least increasing awareness, because different organizations have different percentages and different targets. So I had the opportunity to work in Africa, in Morocco, with a lot of women from most of Africa, including West Africa. And I did like a women in SAR kind of SAR course together with the United States Navy personnel, going through the IMSAR
Killer. I
manual.
like that.
So those programs like are really, really giving. And a lot of them are like administrative, more classroom type, and then there's practical stuff of teaching people. Again, a lot of different organizations work with different projects. And then one interesting area that has really affected Europe and affected pretty much the whole world is the issue of mixed migration.
Yeah.
And there's different reasons, and I won't go into the reasons why people are moving from different geographical areas. But over the decades, really, but and you can go way back in time. You can look at boat people and things like that, whether it's from Haiti or Vietnam or Cuba, stuff that we're familiar with in the United States, different reasons for people moving and how to deal with that from a maritime SAR perspective. But in Europe, obviously, mixed migration, people coming over like from Africa, you probably heard about, from like Libya, and then going to Italy and stuff like that. So in 2015, I had an opportunity to work together with different organizations to okay, how can we as Maritime SAR tackle this enormous, let's say, issue or challenge together? And obviously there's governmental responses and programs and projects, Mare Nostrum and Poseidon, these different EU names. So together with the European Border Guard, the Italian Coast Guard, and then the very fledgling NGOs that were working in the maritime SAR domain, try to help save more people in the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
So almost pretty much exactly, what was it now, 8 years ago, 2015, to the day, I boarded a ship down in Italy and cruised down into the SAR zone outside of Tripoli, Libya. And my role was to work as with mass rescue coordination and advising, because a lot of these ships that were down there, including the governmental ships or Navy or Coast Guard, no one's really done a lot of mass rescue. And mass rescue is different in different situations. It's usually characterized by not having enough resources. That's kind of the definition of mass rescue. So we looked at the different vessels that were needed to transport the number of people. that were in international waters, first and foremost,
Yep.
that needed to be saved and brought to a place of safety. The Italian Coast Guard are experts at this. They've been doing it for a decade, at least. From Lampedusa to all these different cases you may have heard of, um, saving people in unseaworthy vessels with
Yeah.
or without life flotation devices that can be in these major catastrophe, um, where the boat capsizes, the raft punctures. It can be 50 people, 100, 200, 400 in the water, these incredible situations. So I worked together uh, with these different government ships as well as the NGOs, and was on board a boat that was chartered by Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders.
Okay.
So Doctors Without Borders wanted to enter the playing field as rescuers, an amazing organization that, Nobel Prize and all that, and what they do when it comes to field hospitals around the world, and all these different projects, whether it's Ebola, what have you. They are experts, in no doubt. But all of a sudden, they're going from a caring point of view, doctors, sanitation workers, all this kind of stuff, to a rescue perspective. So
Wow.
I came on board to talk a little about the rescue, together with obviously the ship's crew, that were like an offshore supply ship that had done a bunch of rescues by being their ship of opportunity. So I spent a month's time on that ship, particularly, like doing sea rescues of different types of vessels outside of Libya, and then the transport up to different Italian ports that the MRCC Rome would designate. And that was just invaluable experience. The first time, I, the first time you're in a mass rescue situation is it's overwhelming. But
Yeah.
going back to what I was talking about earlier, previously working in the cuckoo's nest or a mental, hospital,
Yeah.
it was like, it wasn't that bad. I was like, everyone is screaming, it's chaos, it's life and death, literally people struggling and pulling themselves up. I was like, I could keep my cool. I felt like, okay, good. I mean, obviously adrenaline's pumping and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but it
Oh
was
yeah.
hard to know what to expect. So the first rescue I ever did together with MSF, as well as the Italian Coast Guard, and I think the British warship was there as well. This rubber boat, you see them in dawn, like you're looking out and doing the full, like, binocular search. If the weather's calm, there's definitely going to be these different rubber boats with 150, 200 people on them. So I saw this thing on the horizon. Oh, okay, there's an actual boat. It's like, okay, to be saved, and you maneuver up to it, try to create a buffer. Um, Doctors Without Borders was fantastic that they had these cultural mediators that spoke French, or perhaps a local dialect in Somalian or Eritrean or something. So
Okay.
you could communicate with them with bullhorns and stuff, to like, hey, this is a rescue boat. We're not going to hurt you. We're here to save you. Keep calm, sit down. Trying to create some sort of order before the ensuing chaos of people trying to jump over, because there's a magnet effect. If you see a rescue boat, they might try to jump overboard. The boat will swamp, it can crush people, all sorts of things like that. And that's unfortunately
Wow.
what happened. One of the first rescues I was involved with was this. The boat punctured, which they're total crap. These
I've
rib
heard
boats.
this actually.
Yeah, and now there's a whole science to it, of how to approach the different boats. But in the beginning, no one was good at it, and we saw a boat collapse, people in the water, no life jackets, and I'm standing there on the gun walls of this large offshore supply ship, looking in the water, while literally hundreds of people are drowning in front of me. I'm just like, okay, what to do now. And like, my first instinct is like some sort of Baywatch. Like, should I jump in and swim around and just grab people because I have a life jacket? But somehow something in my head said, "Don't do it, Matt. You're
Yeah.
not going to survive that. You're going to be pulled down in the masses. You're just adding to the problem if you do that. You'll be a rescuer in trouble." So I somehow stayed on it. I think I hung on the gun wall off the side of the ship, which has a freeboard of, like, it's a couple meters. It's really high. There's,
Yeah.
ships from surface level up, and through like a rope. There's a pilot ladder, which people are jumping onto, like, like ants on a log kind of thing. It's just a chaotic situation, taking everything there that floats. like all life jackets we had on board, special cushions that were like, floaty for 4 people. Um,
Yeah.
Throwing everything just to keep people afloat. If you can keep them floating high, then you have the time to launch the FRB as well as pulling people up in a somewhat orderly fashion. I just remember hanging off the gun while throwing things in and lifting people up with some sort of Herculean strength, one armed He-Man style, and throwing people that probably weighed like a buck 10 or something, like over the. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, there's like 20 people behind me. I was like, oh, I guess I did that. It was just, yeah, this whole idea that you can keep calm in the crazy situation. That wasn't really happening, in the chaos of it all. At least the first time, you get used to it, and I don't want to say you get jaded, but you get into the flow of how the rescue should be. But in this particular instance of the first mass rescue I did, it was like where it went wrong. It was like, okay, let's not do that again. So a lot of the standard operating procedures that are used today,
Yeah.
again, 8 years later, are so methodically thought out by the people that are doing it day in, day out, both NGOs as well as some of the governmental stuff. So a big shout out to SOS Mediterranee, who do an amazing amount of rescues together with the Sea Watch and some of the other NGOs. There are many others, Proactiva, you name it. Anyway, they've worked and refined these mass rescue techniques of how to come in with the FRB boats, fast rescue boats from the mothership, and calm the situation, hand out life jackets in a preventative fashion before shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
So anyway, that technique wasn't so much available or thought out when I was first part of those missions, but we worked on refining them and kind of ad hoc, making things better as they go, and the missions became more and more successful. At that time, I was also had this kind of like, I don't want to say administrative, but like like the executive role as well, being a trustee for this International Maritime Rescue Federation. We would have meetings in Rome, where everyone was in their white dress uniforms, and I had my tie. So I would go from being on the ship and salty and bloody and all that, and then going into like the official meetings to actually discuss how are we going to take care of it. Where MRCC Rome was like, they really wanted more NGOs at that time because they needed the ships, they needed the surface area to transport people, and otherwise you're talking tens of thousands of people a day. It was insane. So that being said, I was able to work together with some of these people in official capacity and say the big brass meetings and talk about what's happening there, how different people can contribute together with the different types of organizations, Frontex, NGO, you name it.
Wow.
The crazy part about like the rescue of mass rescue operations and blue water operations in the Mediterranean or other places that are far from land is that, okay, there's a rescue phase, which can be intense. It can also be nice and calm and fantastic and everyone's happy. But then you have people to take care of on deck. And it can be 100 people, it can be 200, it can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All of a sudden you have 900 people on your aft deck of this supply ship or military vessel or what have you. And it's like, it's like a crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. A lot of people are injured. They came on board being injured. Very common injuries can be crushing injuries, broken bones. They can be sick. This is pre-COVID, so you're talking about like hepatitis or tuberculosis, scabies, all sorts of, all this different stuff. So it's like, it's a medical mission as well as humanitarian and feeding and watering and toilets and stuff like that. So the ship becomes like, humanitarian mission after the rescue phase. And then getting a port of safety or place of safety designated by an MRCC could take some time. There are some horrible accounts over the past 7 years. Sometimes it takes 10 days or 20 or 40. And you're caring for people on board in open sea. And you're not bringing them inside because that's where the crew is. There's a different types of separation. So caring for people in a humanitarian way on board these different rescue vessels, whether governmental or non-governmental, is just as much of a component and something that I think I was in my wheelhouse too, besides the whole, pulling people out of the water from salt water, but also caring together with professionals. And that's what a lot of the government agencies did too, because there would be like hospital ships and stuff. So yeah, that was like my intro into like mass rescue when it came to mixed migration. And part of it, I was wearing the Swedish Sea Rescue life jacket,
Yeah.
as well as my logos and affiliation and stuff, and thinking, can we as a NGO in Sweden contribute to this challenge? Again, both Italian Coast Guards and others wanted help in this, dealing with it back then in 15 and 16 and so forth. So you're like, yeah, but it's blue water operations. Our boats are more near shore, archipelago. We're going to need a larger rescue ship in that case and so forth. So this is in June of 2015. So at the same time, the more people were starting to flee from Syria and Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and so forth, but mostly from Syria during 2015, from Turkey to Greece. So you had this, pretty small body of water. You're talking
Cruising
like just
over the Mediterranean. Yeah.
Yeah, the Aegean
We
Sea.
actually, sorry, I'm going to cut you off real quick.
Please.
Just because we actually had a guest on here. His name is Jose Pastor, and he's a rescue swimmer from Spain. And he was talking a lot about this and his side of it, because it's all volunteer for you guys going out to get it. So to hear it from another aspect is blowing my mind again. Like hundreds of people, thousands of people in the water. Just
I'd like to, but I definitely like to listen to his account of things, definitely, because it's a whole different scale. And again, it's kind of like the towing thing. Like some of them were like, once you've done it a few times, it's like, okay, it's maybe not a big deal, but you're still dealing with 50 or hundreds of lives. That this is something, what kind of a lessons identified or lessons learned. Say I've done it like 50 times or something, and getting the hang of it, and the methodology and what to do in certain situations. It's always the first time for the person in distress.
Oh yeah,
they haven't done it before. So the next group you meet, that's their first time, probably one being on the ocean, being in a rubber raft or a fishing boat or what have you, whatever the method of transportation is, and then in being in chaos and being scared for their lives after already going through a horrible ordeal of whatever they're fleeing for their lives in the first place. So that was one thing, and I definitely like to listen to his perspective. So Greece started happening. The Aegean the numbers were going through the roof of people moving from Turkey to Greece. So coming home back to Sweden, I talked with my boss, Rolf, and said, Libya, the central Mediterranean, that's not for us. But perhaps maybe the Greek islands could be something we could contribute in a positive way as Swedish Sea Rescue. I mean, the Greek islands are an archipelago. There's a lot of Swedes are very familiar with the lovely beach resorts that are on these islands. That was their lifeblood and livelihood of all these people that worked on Lesbos and islands. And people would fly there on charters and be there in the lovely Greek sun. So we talked with the Greeks. So of course, everything's got to be official. We're not just going to rock up and like, hey, Sea Rescue to the, So I started with, I wrote an email to Rear Admiral in the Hellenic Coast Guard, Greek Rear Admiral. Don't Google that. But
Roger
that. So and they were like, yes, Matthew, we would like assistance. Thank you very much. Like, oh, okay, that sounds good. So we brought that, kind of assurance of that the Greeks would like us there to our board. Our board said, okay, the Greeks want us there, then maybe we can do a mission there. So we mobilized, I say, a catastrophe mission from Sweden very quickly. We're talking a number of weeks. So myself, together with a captain, Mikael Hinnersson, my colleague here at Swedish Sea Rescue, who works with sea safety mostly, we went to the Greek islands and did a recon. We went to Lesbos, Chios and Samos, these different islands in the Aegean that were getting hit hardest by number of people and the number of deaths. So we went to, I want to say we went to Lesbos first. And Lesbos is the one in the media that many of your listeners might have heard about, especially with Moria camp. one of the
Okay.
camps that most of the people, you're talking about tens of thousands of people per day at that time in the summer of 2015. And it was like I was standing on the cliff on Lesbos with binoculars and just watching rubber boats one after the other coming across this, whatever, couple nautical miles straight. So you could just
Holy
watch the
cow.
boats leaving, and then it's like, okay, I have time to eat a gyro, and then I can go out and do the rescue. It was really strange. It was almost like
Oh
clockwork.
my God.
Yeah. But on Lesbos, you had the Greek Coast Guard, obviously, that's their domain.
Yep.
Then you had Frontex, which for many listeners know is the European Border Guard, which is comprised of many different countries' nautical assets. It can be
Okay.
Latvian Sea Police, it can be Swedish Coast Guard, which were there. And so Frontex boats were there as well as border protection for stopping smuggling, but as well, of course, search and rescue, and did a countless number of rescues. But on Lesbos, you also had, I think at one time you could count 1,000 non-governmental organizations.
Oh my God.
What most of those were unorganized or semi-organized people on land that wanted to help with clothing, baby formula diapers, you name it, as well as the official ones like UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for refugees and so forth. So
Yeah.
there's and Red Cross and like Doctors Without Borders and what have you. So there's a lot of legitimate ones, and you had a lot of say illegitimate or semi-gray area organizations. Everyone wanting to help in a most organized, chaotic manner. So it's like,
Wow.
okay, Lesbos is not for us. And I met some cool people and some people that their heart was in the right place and eventually got organized. Like when we're talking about sea rescue assets, because a lot of
Yeah.
people just like rocked up with a rib boat and like, hey, I'm a rescuer. And a lot of them got thrown in jail because you just can't
Oh.
rescue. If you're not tasked by the official authorities, then you have no business going out there. You know what I mean?
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so there was a
So
lot
there's
of that.
documentation checks,
I
there's
mean, there's everything.
oh
You
my
have to have your
gosh.
ducks in a row. You can't just rock up to another country expecting to be a SAR agency, you know.
Oh
So
yeah.
Lesbos really wasn't for us. We Mikil and I went to the place on Samos, the island of Samos. Anyone, I definitely recommend visiting there. Amazing people, beautiful topography, amazing beaches, you name it. But
Warmer water than Sweden.
more and more water than Sweden. But I have to say this about Samos is that the weather in the winter, it's chaos because you have these pretty high mountains, like whatever thousands of feet, and the
Yep.
katabatic winds that come off them can blow up to hurricane strength. So it's like, oh, it's all of a sudden 12-foot swell from nowhere. It's almost like lake effect in Lake Erie or something, or it's just insane how quickly it gets chaotic.
Oh
So
wow.
that being said, we did this we did a trip to Samos. We were welcomed by the Coast Guard. We were welcomed by, say, the local police department. We did a tour of the hospital. We talked with the different officials on the islands that were like, yes, you can come here and you can set up camp. And we also looked, what are the rescue assets on Samos? You had the Hellenic Coast Guard, the Greek Coast Guard. They had a couple of older boats. And then you had a couple different Frontex assets, but like one or two boats that were not dimensioned for mass rescue. We're talking like a 20-foot rib or something. It's like, oh, well, you got 50 people you got to save. You know what I mean? So went back to Sweden, did the recon, said Samos is the place. There's a place on Samos called the Coast of Death.
Okay.
It's on the northern part of the island, and it's always been known that because it's like cliffs that go straight up, that
Oh, right on.
with
Yeah, yeah.
waves crashing. And when you have a north wind and waves crashing against, it's really difficult. One thing that's really difficult on Samos is that you have, I think it was, let's say, a monastery on top of the hill,
Oh
on top of this
wow.
mountain. And unfortunately, the monastery has a light. It's like one of the only light sources on this northern part of the island. And when people leave Turkey in a rubber boat in the middle of the night, they aim towards the light, land, and it goes straight into the cliff. So it's almost like
Oh.
this way to certain death, you know?
Oh.
So when we heard that and we stood on the coast of depth and we're like, oh, Samos is the place. This is where we can make a difference. Mick and I looked at each other. Blue water, big cliffs. It's an archipelago. Dude, we're setting up shop here if the Greek authorities will want us to be here. So everything went check. Yes, yes, yes. Went back to Sweden. Um, got our boats ready. We had like two 12-meter boats. I don't remember like the foot equivalents. You guys can look it
Nah,
up. It's
you're
about
good. Yep,
38,
yep.
40 foot, double
Sounds
water
good.
jet boats. We said we're sending 2 units there, all-weather lifeboats, Victoria class. They're pretty awesome. Check them out. Why 2 boats? Well, if we get in trouble in this foreign place, foreign country, it's not necessarily we get help from the Greek authorities in bad weather.
Yeah.
So we want to have redundancy. So the whole idea behind this mission was like, there's 2 boats and 1 crew, and you're going to work in tandem, never leave each other's side. One goes in and does the rescue, the other one's on standby to help the rescue boat going in case.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
the idea. That was the whole idea going into it. So we shipped these 2 boats, 12 meters, on like flatbed trucks with a convoy exceptional all the way through Europe down to Piraeus, outside of Athens, the major harbor there. And the Greek Coast Guard kind of like, oh, you showed up. So we're like at the gates of Piraeus, like with 2 rescue boats, and they're like, oh no, what do we do with these Swedes? Well,
we told them they could come, and now they're really here.
I have an email. But it's like some of it was a little bit lost in translation, but some of it was like, okay. But they looked, they grilled our DP at the time, Captain Andreas Arvidsson. They grilled him really hard about our procedures, our safety, all that. And he passed the test, but also looking at these boats, the 2 Victoria classes, they're like, oh, these are serious SAR units that we don't have.
Oh,
so they were
nice.
like, yeah. So they were like, oh yeah, this looks good. You go ahead, Sweden. Feel free. Sail to Samos. So within 28 days of the decision from the board, when we said, let's go to Samos, we set up station on Samos. So
holy smokes.
Yeah. So this was
That's fast.
That's the flexibility of our NGO, our particular organizations. Like if we say turn starboard, we turn starboard in a quick amount of obviously risk assessment and all different types of risk assessment and safety. But then the next thing is like, it's back to our volunteers. It's like, okay, we got to put a crew on this boat or 2 boats, based on a volunteer pool of people, and the whole of Europe pretty much knows about the crisis, and it's in the media every day. Everyone wants to help, like I said, on Lesbos.
Yeah.
In Sweden, they're having this gala on like one of the largest indoor stadiums. Like everyone give to Red Cross, like catastrophe aid kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we announced that we're going to be there, so we can try to create like a funding opportunity, because we don't want to take funding from our central organization that goes to our Swedish operations or membership money. So we're able to do some sort of like, hey, call this number and donate, what have you. So I'm trying to put crew together for this organization, and someone, I don't know who, put my email address as like,
point of contact
to Matthew if you want to be on board. I kid you not, 2,000 applications within 48 hours.
Oh,
and it wasn't just from our organization. It was from like, Red Cross Stockholm, or, I'm a nurse in Denmark. Like, yeah, cool for you. I'm trying to put together a crew. So, oh man, it was insane. So I looked obviously for people in our organization that were professional mariners. We had to have a pretty high degree of, the people that had navigation skills, obviously, but also knew about stability of boats and knew how to do stability calculations, because you're talking about putting 50 some people on our 12-meter boats. So that when it comes to the coxswains, we're looking for a higher degree that we normally require for driving our boats. Looking for people that had past foreign experience, whether it's United Nations, military, police, ambulance, Doctors Without Borders, so forth. Anyone that's, excuse again the term, been in the shit, have been in a place where that it's not everything, the safety network of Sweden's not going to exist there in the same way. So I'm looking for people that weren't adverse or have a problem of being uncomfortable. So yeah, put these amazing teams together. And from the very first shout, this team of highly professional volunteers, they go down there. We put about 5 or 6 people on each boat to man up a little bit. There's not a lot of space on these boats, and we want to have the right amount of crew, but you can't put 20 people on this boat because you also have to save 20 people or 50 people or
Right,
whatever.
right.
Yeah. We also had journalists on board. There were so
Oh,
many journalists
wow.
during this whole time, and they were helpful in the way that they could tell the story and show pictures of sea rescue and promote that. So that
Yeah.
was good in the beginning, for sure. Um, so the very first shout they get, there's people on the rocks uh, that were really inaccessible. There was a boat that capsized. You have 30 some people in the water. I mean, you're talking full catastrophe again, but in an archipelago. So they buzz around the corner from the harbor of Bati on Samos, around the corner, past these cliffs, and get to the point. And it wasn't like you get like a last known position from the U.S. From the Greek Coast Guard or the MRCC. It's like, yeah, you go past the church and on the and there's like a rock that we call that Johnny Rock. Like it was like, okay. So luckily we had like Greek liaison officers on board, from the
Yeah.
Coast Guard as well as the local rescue team, and they can say, yeah, go past the church rock over there. Like this is really weird way of operating, but we got used to it the Greek way pretty
Oh
quick.
my gosh. Hey, there's a
Yeah.
wishing well over there. Make a left at the wishing
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Where the priest had his summer home? Like,
Oh yeah, of
oh
course.
yeah,
Why?
yeah. Past the rock that looks like Abraham Lincoln, or Pythagoras in this case. But anyway, they do
Oh,
this
that's funny.
fantastic mission, and they were able to save a lot of people from the water. Um, for anyone listening that want to see part of this rescue, it's
Yeah.
available actually on YouTube. I think it's called 46 Saved or something like that. Maybe we'll send the link in if it's possible together with
Yeah,
your
no.
podcast.
Send it
But
to me
anyway,
and I'll see what I can do with it.
it gives you an idea, a visual picture of what the rescue conditions look like, with the crew, with the boat, being brand new to this, and also my fantastic colleague Frederick Forschmann, who we do mass rescue courses together with the U.S. Coast Guard, and his reaction as being the coxswain on board. Frederick, gets hit, so concentrated in the moment, doing what he's supposed to do, leading through a crisis. And after it's done and you unload the people in the place of safety, you can see him break down. The
Oh,
emotions that just
wow.
well up through him is incredible. And it was like that's the feeling that encapsulate being in that type of rescue in the first time. So I recommend this to all the people that are listening. I
Okay.
use this particular video for trying to explain mass rescue or mixed migration mass rescue to non-sea rescuers. I try to talk with government officials a lot, um, and a shout out to the San Remo Institute, which is the International Institute for Humanitarian Law. So they talk about
Okay.
humanitarian law cases, and it's a lot of caseworkers from UNHCR, the United Nations, as well as different marine and migration ministers from students and participants from around the world. So I show this video. We talk about what is sea rescue really. That's beyond the numbers, because what you can read in whether it's New York Times, The Guardian, whatever newspaper, it's like, oh, 15 people, 50 people were rescued. Oh, 100 people showed up in Key West, or what have you. You know what I mean? It's
Right,
just
right.
numbers. It's
Yeah.
numbers, but it's not what it feels like for the SAR personnel. It's not what it feels
Yeah.
like for the people in distress. So anyway,
Yeah.
cool video. We get the Greek the Greek Coast Guard sees that we can do these things, and we build upon this experience. So I'm scrambling, trying to get crew together and trying to get even more trust from the Greek authorities that we can be here and be longer on the island of Samos, because the whole idea is this is like in October, so it's starting to be their winter or fall, and again, it's not as warm and beautiful as the brochure says. The winds
Yeah.
start kicking up. Every single mission is more or less like a really difficult one. So one that sticks out in my mind, um, really, really strange situation. I had crew that would fly from Sweden to the island of Samos, and then the new crew would come in, and we tried to, like, I guess you would say, stagger them in a way that the old
Yep.
crew could train them on the new one. Obviously, they're
Oh,
you know,
nice.
unfamiliar waters. Um, here's our area of action. This is our SAR area. We go around the corner. This is where we buy our euros and lattes, and which is another weird thing because you're in a crisis area around the corner, but when you go back home, we were staying in hotels and eating like kings, and queens.
Yeah.
Like we have to
Yeah.
we have to feed ourselves to take care of our bodies and minds, and then all of a sudden the alarm goes, or we go out and check things out. Um, and just to let everyone know, the crew was on for 2 weeks because my experience in the central Mediterranean, I was there for about a month. I was like, yeah, that's a lot of rescue. That's intense. You
That's a
got to
long
go
time.
you got to go home because you're on call 2 weeks, and there's going to be something almost every day, if not five a day or what have you, depending on what the weather's like. And so anyway, we shifted out the crew. We were doing a staggering and showing this new crew, the north side, this death coast, like I said, coast of death. We're doing boarding exercises where the two ships would come together, just to come together, tie up, and talk to each other. And for some reason, the boarding didn't go as correct or something. We're just getting the feel for the boats or something. So we turned off engines, powered down the engines, and started talking to each other. We're on the north side of the island, talking to each other while we're standing on deck, these different crews. And all of a sudden, we hear this cry for help, like a literal, like, help, help in the distance. It's kind of like in the early evening,
Yeah.
sun setting. So we were just thinking about doing a quick exercise and going home and getting rest for the next show. So we hear this help, help, and it's getting louder, and we're looking up the cliffs, and it's like maybe like whatever, I don't want to say 1,000 feet, but it's a couple hundred meters at least, and we're looking with the binoculars, and also we see a small group of people that are stranded on like this cliff ledge, where there's like really scrubby brush, and so they're kind of in the trees, kind of in the brush, and we see them. So it's like, okay, well, there's people that obviously, and there's, when you look at the coast of where the sea meets the cliffs, there's rubber boats like that are just crashed and torn apart, that are like discarded, because it's hard to know. Like you have to identify, is that a fresh boat, or is that, oh, that's been there for a month, or so you
Wow.
kind of have to like chart it out a little bit. So anyway, we didn't see any fresh boats, but we saw people up there, so obviously they had made land sometime, and
Yeah.
they couldn't get out from this predicament, or this, the topography was way too difficult. So we get the boats, we're able to slowly like come in, and these are water jet boats, and so they can go in really shallow waters. The draft is like less than a meter, so
Wow.
go, yeah, it's really fantastic maneuverability. There wasn't, the sea state was fine, so we can nose in very slowly. But first we sent a rescue swimmer over, who was actually a rescue swimmer for the Swedish helicopters.
Oh,
Again,
nice.
I
Nice.
was looking for specialists in different areas to try to put, plug the gaps and bring a certain set of skills. So a very good friend of mine, rescue swimmer Jens Samuelsson for the Swedish Maritime Administration, he swam over, took off his gear, ran, pretty much did some mountain climbing with his wetsuit, and took the snorkel out, but it's still pretty warm, and established contact with them, and realized, okay, it's a couple different families, mostly men, women, and children, grandmothers, and so forth. Around 17 or so, these people, and they tell us that they sent two of the men to try to climb and find safety or help. And that's a big climb. We're looking up there like, okay, well, maybe we might be doing recovery after this. So yeah, we come back. We get able to go with the boats into the cliff, and it's a climb. We're talking a couple hundred feet of climbing up through this scrub brush, loose, jagged rocks, really crap rock. It's not like you're setting like really good rock climbing, or a path down like a mountain goat. So we get up to them, and we're, obviously do triage, like, okay, try to establish contact. The whole group was from Syria. I found a boy, probably like around 15 or something like that, and he
Yeah.
spoke pretty good English. I was like, okay, Ahmad, or Ahmed, excuse me. I was like, we'll talk. You talk and I talk, and you can translate for the group. Hey, good. We've established comms, and this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna slowly, one by one, try to get you down the cliffs to that rescue boat and take you to the safe harbor. So anyway, they say, okay, they're in agreement. It's getting darker, but it's like, okay, we still have some light, but we're burning daylight. And so we have the combination of safety, headlamps. Oh, we
Yeah.
have climbing equipment, harnesses, or we're gonna have to like, rappel these people off. But we find like eventually we make our own little kind of goat trail down. That should be for most people safety to get down. and I use the boy as the translator to describe things. He's first to go down, and he yells back up, and we create a chain of communication explaining our whole procedure. And this is a laborious process, even if it's 17 people. We're pretty high up, and one by one, and all of a sudden, all of a sudden they hand you a baby. It's like, oh, okay,
Of
I need my
course.
own balance, and I'm like, okay, I have a baby in one arm, and I have a grandmother in the other, and I'm like, okay, wait, stay there, and we would do like the thing, like I would climb down, I would hand the baby off to someone else, and then they would hand it to me, and then, this whole kind of procedure of getting down the cliff, and then it's dark, and it's headlamp time, and we're getting the majority of people off, but it's we get the people that are fast and easy, quick, and then get some of the and then maybe in the middle before it's too dark, get the vulnerable small children down, so it's
Yep.
not dark, and they're not scared. Luckily, in the Sea Rescue Society, we have like a teddy bear. We all have different mascots. Yeah, and like we have a
I got you.
teddy bear with a Swedish Sea Rescue life jacket. That
Right.
was just as important as my like first aid kit. It's like this kid's screaming in my arms. Here's a teddy bear. Be happy. I'm gonna get you to the boat. So, oh yeah. So we get them down
Wow.
slowly, and then finally, like the last person, like the grandmother or something, the one that's the least mobile of the group, and that was full on harnesses and rappelling her and setting up anchors and getting her down the cliffs, and she's screaming, like oh, crazy, but
Jeez,
we
oh
have the situation under
man.
control, and so we get everyone on board, and we're sitting. They're down in the transport area. They can pretty much all fit on one boat, and we're sitting in this transport area and just not saying a word. I mean, they're calm now. They're almost falling asleep. And I'm talking with the boy and his mother, and like finally, like, how long you been here? Like 2 days. They've been
Oh
on that cliff.
wow.
They've been on that cliff for 2 days. Like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah. So we're sitting there in this like this just feeling like this vibration going through us, like looking at each other. I'm looking at one of the Greek rescuers we had with us, who's a consultant who did a lot of the mountain rescue stuff, Yannis, and looking at the rescue swimmer, Jens, and like we're not saying a word, but we're just feeling the flow. Like, man, that was just it wasn't clockwork, but we handled that situation in an unfamiliar territory with fairly unfamiliar like rescue techniques in a different country. It's like and save these people. So it was just this amazing feeling, like getting in that flow state was probably one of the more memorable experiences from that mission. We get to the port and help the people that needed medical attention, the ambulance and so forth, and a lot of the aid workers first was a Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders and UHCR and Frontex. They met them and they get them into shelter, and not more than like an hour after we made port, like around midnight or something, like this storm comes in like a hurricane. And there's film of it. It's like blowing Beaufort 9 or something, and wind is going sideways, and we're just like, oh, they would not have survived that night. I mean, they would have gotten blown off the rock, let alone. So it
Wow.
just felt like it was so meant to be that we went out there, and it was like a testament of the way the rescues evolved out there. It was a lot of time like seeing, hearing, smelling. It wasn't just waiting for a radio call with last known coordinates. It was,
Yeah.
being part of proactive in it. So after that rescue, I walked into that next morning after a very good night's sleep.
I'm
Walked
sure of
into
it.
walked into the Greek Coast Guard, and they literally stood up and applauded, like Swedish super team, like yeah, okay, cool. Like
Wow.
we got that respect, and they're like, you know what, the liaison officer, he doesn't need to be with anymore. It's like we know you're capable. So this is like in November or whatever 2015. Our mission lasted from I would say October 15 to around June of 2016.
Holy
So we did
smoke.
during the toughest like winter months with the really bad acclimate weather. Our crew and our rescue boats were able to save around 2,000 people during this mission. Um,
Oh
it
my
was pretty incredible.
gosh.
So one of the most incredible things I have to reconnect about that story, this family, is that I mean, at least like maybe a half year later, like we had taken a lot of pictures and stuff like that, and one of these pictures ran in a Swedish newspaper of a rescuer, sea rescuer called Nils, and it was together with the boy that was helping me translate. It was a picture of like Nils was in the Mediterranean helping Syrian refugees, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
This family saw the picture in the newspaper because they had made it to Sweden by then.
Oh,
So they
wow.
went from Greece, after being saved, whatever, 6 months later, the journey that took them through Europe eventually ended up in a small town in Sweden. I don't want to say where, but they ended up in the city, and they saw it, and they made contact with Nils, like, hey, that's us. And we were reunited with this family.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So it was really cool, like that, and that was throughout the whole mission. We would reconnect with these different people that we'd saved, but this was one of the ones that like we saw them in Sweden again. And we heard from them later at this time when we met with them in Sweden, is that the grandmother that I said that we had to repel and save and all that, and the mother, they hadn't seen each other for 2 years because of the war in Syria.
Oh, wow.
They were traveling, across from Syria, across Turkey. They ended up on the same rubber boat and were reunited on the beach in Turkey and ended up on this cliff together after years of not being together because of war.
No
I was like,
way.
this one of these coincidences, like this is just not true. So the whole rescue just took on a whole different dimension, and that definitely being able to reconnect with people was insane. And that was the strange thing with our mission, is that when we save people so from the jaws of death, of this coast of death, and then bring them around the corner into harbor, they would get help, and then later that spring, like people would be they started making the camps a little different, closing the camps and make them a little bit more like detention centers, like you mentioned, the pre-mentioned Moria on Lesbos.
Yeah.
And that changed the aspect of our mission there. It's like, okay, we're sea rescuers, we want to save people, and hopefully they can go further. We're not there to judge on their legal status or what have you. We're there to save
Yeah.
lives, SAR and SAR only. But it made it more difficult for us to bring people and save them and bring them to detention. And it was like, okay, this is maybe not our mission. By then, in the spring of 2016, more Frontex resources had arrived to the island of
Got it.
Samos. The Italian Coast Guard, which are without a doubt the experts at this, they arrived and we talked with them. The German, say like sea police from a certain city with very good SAR units, they arrived as well. So we were able to phase out and have an exit strategy for our part in this.
Wow.
So one of the things that kind of hit me there, like when we're going saving people, like I think it was in February or something of 2016, was like I would go up to the camps and like meet the people we saved the day before. And sometimes the kids would be playing outside, and like we would throw the ball, or there was like Clowns Without Borders and all these types of entertainment, or trying to keep the people like psychologically happy after this great ordeal. And I met this kid, boy, I think he was from Afghanistan. He was in the camp behind the fence. I couldn't get on that side of the fence, but I just said, hey, how are you? Is your family okay after yesterday, after this boat ride and all that? And he's like, yes. And he said something that it still hits me to my core. He said, thank you for saving my life. I was like, yeah, it feels great. I've heard that a lot, and I've been in the privileged position to hear that a lot through all these different rescues, whether it's here in Sweden, which is rare.
Yeah.
It's mostly saving people from the lips of inconvenience and not the jaws of death. But in mass rescue situations, there's a lot of people in praying and thank you, sir, and oh, thank you, fantastic. So this little boy said, thank you for saving my life. Yeah, absolutely, it's no problem. He said, thank you for treating me like a human.
Oh, wow.
And oh man, I was dumbfounded. I was just like, first there was like a young boy that said something so profound, but also that it hit me so hard. It's like, not only do we save people, but we treat them with dignity. And it's the way that you save people is like, it's just as important as that he felt like he was, I don't know, identified as a person, as something that's a living being with a soul and a future and all that. And man, I think about that all the time. Thank you for treating me like a human. I was like, dude, mission accomplished. This is the time to furl out the banner. It's like, it was just like, oh, we did the right thing at the right time, at the right place, with the right people. That was kind of the mission there. So since then, I've been doing everything in our power. We saved a lot of people. We built up a lot of good partnerships, and still many of those partnerships live on today. And I kind of feel like it's our duty, those of us that have been involved with mass rescue situations, whether it's mixed migration or whatever, is to take some of that, knowledge of standard operating procedures and the pure sea rescue stuff and explain it further, and to pretty much anyone who listens. So mass rescue operations are usually pretty far down on the agenda of priorities for different maritime administrations.
Yeah.
It's kind of like thought of like Costa Concordia or large cruise ships that maybe run aground, or maybe 17 crew on a vessel that's taking on water. So it's not usually, it's not high on the agenda.
Hundreds. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not usually hundreds and hundreds of people.
yeah, exactly. And we say this like in our courses and when we talk to people, it's like it's not a matter of if, it's when. All
Yeah.
these different places are going to get affected by some sort of mass rescue, and hopefully it's one that can be taken care of in an orderly manner. And there's all these different case studies to look at in the maritime world, as well as mixed migration, and a lot of lessons learned and lessons identified that have cross pollination. So again, I try to any possible opportunity I have to talk about MROs with maritime professionals and how they should look at it, I definitely jump on that. Together with U.S. Coast Guard people, where we teach a course that's called the MRO Subject Matter Expert Group, or Subject Matter Expert Course, and that's through the IMRF, where it's a couple days of just getting down to some of the details of what an MRO can look like and try to apply it to your own, say, operational sphere and your country, and what are your assets and what are the possible problems and so forth. Here in Sweden, our little Swedish Sea Rescue Society, non-governmental, we've organized mass rescue conferences for the IMRF. We've had 5 different mass rescue conferences where we get, say, not just subject matter experts, but also people, captains, administrators that have been involved in different case studies, and we get them into the auditorium here at our offices here, and present them, PowerPoint, giving speeches, but really try to get down to the nitty gritty of what actually happened that you may not read in the official reports,
Yeah.
and just get people talking about the subject, and that way when they come home from Sweden to whatever, Malaysia or Peru or what have you, that they can start thinking about it and applying some of the things that they learned here with us. So it's super cool. And one of the things we do for this conference is that the first day is a Sunday usually. It's a practical exercise. A lot of us go to different maritime conferences, and there'll be a helicopter winching one. It's probably you that's going down and like showing people this is what rescue swimming looks like. So we do that here, but people rock up with their blazers and their ties. So I'm like, yeah, okay, but you're part of the exercise. I'm like, what? Well, do you want to be on the MRCC? Do you want to be on shoreside response, or do you want to be on the boats or in the life raft? And they're like, oh, I want to be on the boats. I'm like, yeah, sure. So it's usually like 100 or so people that come to the conference, 150 or something. The first day of our conference, what they call the G series for Gothenburg, they go out and we do a large mass rescue exercise and have different roles. That way, when we go in and talk about the case studies in the auditorium, we just experience something that's, as close as possible in an exercise situation, thrown together. So it's a lot of fun, and try to touch people, many people as possible with MRO stuff. So that's kind of my main area of focus when it comes to international right now.
Wow, Matthew, holy
Yeah.
smoke. That is crazy. That's awesome.
Thanks.
I love it.
Good. It's good work. There's a lot of good people doing good work like that.
What you're bringing to the table and everything you've done is incredible. I'm blown away. I really am.
Cool.
Wow.
It's an honor and privilege to be able to talk and speak to it. And I know I talk a lot, and in no way am I trying to be like boasting about things. I just want to get things out here. And I think that's what the real advantage of this type of podcast and your work here is, like, it's just getting different stories out there. And it doesn't have to be in a report or, accident evaluations, but it's just the talk and hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. And, yeah,
that's why I do this.
Cool. And more power to this. And I hope this has been somewhat, give something to someone out there.
Man, I've enjoyed it immensely. So thank you, big time. So a couple questions if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
please.
So I'm going to back up just a little bit to you have 2,400 people that volunteer for your service.
Yeah,
How do people get trained? Like, what's the
yeah.
training involved? And we don't have to go super long
No, I don't
into
have to
it,
go through
but
the whole thing, but
yeah.
like a simple like people ask all the time, it's like, what does it take to be a volunteer for the Swedish Sea Rescue? It's like
Yeah.
it takes time and heart. And I mean, it takes dedication. It's like, and that sounds like a very cliche answer, but it's like, yeah, I mean, because we're going to teach you the rest. A lot of people, they have a maritime background. They maybe have a boat themselves. They like to go sailing or what have you. Some people come from fire, all that kind of stuff. But when you get in here, it's like, okay, you're a student for a bit. You're, like the greenhorn, and you're going to be on deck and maybe just watch, maybe not even get to tie up, and then go through your like not proficiency, kind of like Cub
Oh,
Scouts or
nice.
something,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah. Okay.
but then when after you've proven probably at least a season or something as a student or whatever you want to say, then you apply for a central course, and the first central course is the we call the basic safety. So it's a 3-day basic safety where first aid, maritime survival with life rafts and all that, like putting on the suits, the 6 hour, the survival suits, immersion suits, um, flares, la la la, and then the firefighting. And we say firefighting, it's really just putting out fires with different types of handheld stuff, not so much going in with full masks. We're not putting people out to sea in like big cargo ships. So the 3-day thing that, and then once they do this the basic safety, it's like, okay, you can be like probably a sea rescuer, as well as when I say sea rescue, you can put on the life jacket, you get the name tag, and then you start doing, there's a lot of local exercises. So all these different training modules, like most of us have in our organizations, going through the
Yeah.
different modules, whether it's first aid or towing, SAR, search, and all that. We do a lot of local trainings. So back to
Sweet.
that 14,000 times leaving dock, 6,000 of those are training exercises, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
So all the
Wow. Wow.
local
Wow.
stations do local training, local training, local training. Uh, that's to an approved standard within us as well as the Swedish Maritime Administration. That's called basic SAR. And then there are specialized courses centrally that we have that are like specific to that type of boat units handling. You know,
Yeah.
you go to that island in that training course to learn how to drive that boat, and
Oh,
that's like a
wow.
3-day
Okay.
course, or
Yep.
dynamic navigation, or leadership, or on-scene coordinator, stuff like that. So there's a plethora of students and courses, and I would say at least 1,000 centrally run courses each
That's
year,
a
or at least,
lot.
or 1,000 students go through the courses of different
Oh,
grades. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a big organization, and you
jeez. Oh,
can't get this
man.
training anywhere. So it's like, what do you want to do in your free time? It's like a lot of people love football, soccer, and whatever different sports. It's like, yeah, but can you get on a boat and do these fantastic things? Maybe get winched by a helicopter. Um, but then you got to put in the hours, and there's the whole volunteer life cycle. It's like, we don't want people to stay for 2 years or 1 year for that matter. It's like, we're going to invest in you. Hopefully you're going to stay longer.
Yeah.
And what just as important as the training is that like it's a good culture at the station. That's like that you rock up and don't have the same experience as I had 20 years ago when you try to become a volunteer. They're like, nah, dude, we don't need you. Like
Bro,
we want people to
I
be
don't
inclusive
I
and
don't
all
need
that.
you.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly. Cut your hair and grow a beard, you know?
You know what? I think there's a song about that. It's
Yeah, almost cut my hair.
yeah, yeah.
No, exactly.
Man, that's awesome.
So a lot of good central training, a lot of good local training, and yeah, just being on station and hanging out with people. It takes time, but it's also so fantastic to be able to like be on a beautiful place. Luckily, as we all know, most sea rescue places, they're located in amazing waterfront places. So it's not bad to be out in some of these places on our amazing boats in the middle of July or February for that matter. Everything has its charm.
I like that. So you just tell me the best time of year to come out, and I'll just
You're welcome anytime.
schedule a little
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
No, but
like
I can tell you, there is this really certain charm that when we have our basic safety classes in February, you got to break the ice to be able to jump off the tower.
oh
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So
The
the sea
polar
survival part
plunge,
is,
baby.
yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I
Oh,
love it.
that's so cool.
Yeah,
Man, I would love to come out with you guys just to hang out for a little while and really kind of get involved with what you're doing out there. That'd be
Yeah.
incredible.
One of the really cool things, and again, I don't want to sound too cliche and all that, but there is a SAR family. It's like, and people that, whether you're maritime SAR or, rescue swimmer helicopters and all that, it's like you learn and meet people. And I feel like I can go pretty much to most places in not just an official capacity, but also just like, hey, I work in sea rescue, and they might be like, hey, yeah, check this out, and just show me something, their boat
Yeah.
in Spain or what have you. But we also have these like formal crew exchanges that we work on. So through the International Maritime Rescue Federation,
Okay.
which a lot of organizations of your listeners are members of, we run a formal lifeboat crew exchange. So I think for about 10 years now, we've had like 500 people go through this exchange program where different
Wow.
both NGOs and governments like send one person abroad, and we accept like 7 or 8 here or something like that. So we're doing the crew exchange this year again in 2023, and it's a week long. So we're from France and England, Finland, Sweden, Holland, excuse me, Netherlands, and stuff like that. We're going to exchange crew, and they get to be here for a week. And after that week is like, not only do they get to experience, like what we have in Sweden, and our Swedish people that we sent out get to experience what they have in Holland and so forth. It's like they become so much like tight friends. There's this,
Oh, that's cool.
camaraderie, brotherhood, sisterhood it's hard to beat, because we're saving lives together. It's pretty unique.
When are you doing that? Because I might just have to show
September.
up.
It's September, yeah. It's a bit of a more of a formal program, but what happens is that
Oh,
we have an application
formal.
process, but what happens is that there are spin-offs from it. So people, they become friends, and like, hey, I'm going to visit you next summer in Marseille, and you come visit me in
Oh, that's so
Stockholm
cool.
or what have you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's super cool to see that building, and I love meeting people from all around.
Man, that's great. Oh, I love it. Love it. All right, one more question,
Sure.
and then we'll let you go because I've had you here for a long time and I've loved every minute of it, and I would keep going, but I know you have stuff to do, so it's all good. How do people, or what advice would you give people that would be in your path? Like, what advice would you pass on to everybody else coming up to get into what you're doing, and then once you're there, like anything you'd
Yeah.
pass on?
Again, it's a long and winding road. When I came to my way of moving to a different country and learning the language, but definitely, like, you have people that come to Sweden, you should learn the language. Everyone knows really proficient in English and all that. But in all these different countries I've talked about before, especially in Europe, they have amazing volunteer sea rescue opportunities. So you don't have to go through the formal cadet processes of different types of government agencies and so forth, but you have to obviously be dedicated with time and stuff. So if you live in Europe, especially Northern Europe, like aforementioned countries like Finland, Holland, UK, France, you name it, definitely look into that. And if you're in Sweden, yeah, and you're a national expat or something, yeah, learn the language, talk to me, and get you started on a volunteer career. And
Perfect.
all around the world, Australia, you name it. There's a lot of cool opportunities. And then obviously those that want to become professional and full time, that's a different career path, but I'm sure that's possible for most of us traveling abroad and maybe you meet a partner somewhere else and you put down roots.
Yeah.
You should be able to continue whatever you're doing for the love of the sea, and so that others may live.
Oh man, Matthew, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for coming on, joining me. I can't thank you enough. It's been an honor to have you here. So it's
Well,
good.
thanks so much, Connie. That's great. Good stuff.
Absolutely. I am gonna come to Sweden. I'm gonna come find you, and
Yeah,
then all right. Yeah.
good.
Can
I'll be waiting.
if I'll be the guy in the water. You just come get me. Is that cool?
Yep. There we go. Good. Put my hand down.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right, brother. Well, I will catch you the next time I come out, or whenever I see you at one point or another.
Welcome.
Cool. Right on. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Go. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real ResQ Podcast. Please take a minute to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story they would be willing to share, I would be humbled and honored to have you on as a guest. Or if you have any questions about rescue or anything else we talk about here, send an email to jason@therealresq.com. That's Jason at TheRealResQ.com. You can also check us out on our web pages, therealresq.com, our Facebook page, and our Instagram page @TheRealResQ. Again, a special thank you to all of you staying on the watch today. Always remember, when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, fly safe and swim hard.